Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mysterious Murmurs. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. The Midnight Visitor. Sarah lived in an old Victorian house on the outskirts of the city, its creaky floors and drafty windows adding to the eerie ambiance. One cold winter night, she was curled up in her bed, engrossed in a mystery novel. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but she was used to these sounds. Suddenly, she heard a faint, rhythmic knocking on her bedroom window. Her heart skipped a beat. The window was on the third floor, impossible to reach without a ladder. She tried to dismiss it as her imagination, or perhaps a bird, but the sound persisted, growing louder. Then her phone buzzed on the bedside table. The message read, "I'm here. Let me in." Her blood ran cold. The number was unknown, and the time read 3 a.m. She checked the window, but it was too dark to see outside. The knocking stopped. Sarah took a deep breath, convincing herself it was just a prank. She returned to her book, but her phone buzzed again. Another message, "Look closer." Against her better judgment, she grabbed her flashlight and shined it toward the window. What she saw made her scream. A pale, hollow-eyed face staring back at her. But it wasn't just any face. It was her own, twisted in a grotesque grin. She scrambled out of the room, her breath shallow and quick. As she reached the stairs, she heard a voice whisper behind her, "You shouldn't have looked." The next morning, Sarah's bedroom window was found shattered from the inside. But Sarah herself was never seen again. Story 2. The Forgotten Door. David had just moved into a small, affordable apartment in the city. The place was perfect, except for one odd detail, a locked door in the hallway. The landlord assured him it was a utility closet and not to worry about it. Weeks passed without incident, but David couldn't shake his curiosity about the door. Late at night, he started hearing faint whispers coming from behind it. At first, he dismissed it as his mind playing tricks, but the whispers grew louder, almost pleading. One night, he decided to investigate. Armed with a screwdriver, he pried the door open. Inside was a small, windowless room. It was completely empty, except for an old wooden chair facing a wall covered in deep scratch marks. The whispers stopped the moment he stepped in, replaced by an overwhelming silence. Shaken, he closed the door and tried to forget about it. But that night, the whispers returned, louder and angrier. They now came from all around his apartment. Doors slammed, lights flickered, and he could hear footsteps pacing the hallway. When he opened his eyes in the morning, the door was wide open, and the chair was now in the middle of his bedroom. A single word was carved into the floor beneath it: "Stay." David moved out the next day, but the whispers followed him. Story 3. The Lost Child. Mia was driving home late one night through a dense forest road. The trees cast eerie shadows under her headlights, and the road was deserted. As she rounded a bend, she saw a little girl standing by the roadside, her face streaked with tears. Mia pulled over and rolled down her window. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The girl didn't speak. She just pointed into the dark woods. Despite her better judgment, Mia stepped out of her car, shining her flashlight into the forest. "Where are your parents?" she asked, but the girl only started walking into the woods. Mia followed, calling after her. The deeper they went, the colder it became, and the sound of crickets and rustling leaves faded into silence. Suddenly, Mia realized the girl was gone. Panicking, she turned back toward the road, but found herself completely disoriented. The trees seemed to close in around her, their gnarled branches like skeletal hands. Then she heard it, faint laughter echoing from all directions. The girl's voice whispered, "You shouldn't have followed me." Shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, their glowing eyes fixed on Mia. Her car was found abandoned the next morning. Mia was never seen again. Story 4. The Static Signal. Mark had always been fascinated by vintage electronics, so when he found an old TV at a thrift store, he brought it home immediately. It didn't work at first, but after some tinkering, he managed to get it to turn on. The screen displayed nothing but static. Mark thought it was just a signal issue, but then the static started forming patterns. Faces, shapes, and sometimes even words that vanished too quickly to read. One night, as he was about to turn off the TV, a distorted voice crackled through the static. "Don't turn around." Mark froze. His heart raced as the voice repeated, "Don't turn around." Against his better judgment, he glanced over his shoulder. Nothing. He sighed in relief and turned back to the TV, only to see his own reflection in the static. But something was wrong. His reflection smiled at him, though he wasn't smiling. The next day, Mark's friends found his apartment empty, the TV still playing static. Story 5. The Unseen Passenger. Ella was coming home late after a party. She flagged down a cab, relieved to finally sit down and rest. The driver seemed nervous, glancing in the rear-view mirror every few seconds. "Is something wrong?" Ella asked. The driver hesitated. "You're alone, right?" Ella nodded, confused. She glanced in the rear-view mirror herself and felt her blood run cold. Sitting right beside her was a figure, a pale, featureless face staring straight ahead. She turned her head, but the seat next to her was empty. What was that?" she stammered. The driver didn't answer, speeding up as if trying to outrun something. The figure reappeared in the mirror, closer this time. The car suddenly swerved off the road, crashing into a tree. When Ella woke up, she was alone in the car. The driver was gone, and in the shattered mirror, she saw the figure smiling back at her. Story 6. The Mirror Maze. The carnival arrived in the sleepy town of Silver Falls every summer, but this year it brought a new attraction, a sprawling mirror maze. Flyers promised an unparalleled experience. Face yourself like never before. Clara and her friends decided to explore the maze on its opening night. From the outside, it looked unassuming, a large tent with colorful lights. But once inside, the air was heavy and cold, the faint scent of metal lingering. The maze was disorienting. Each turn led to countless reflections, some distorted, some eerily lifelike. Clara laughed nervously as her reflection seemed to move slightly out of sync. "This place is weird," she muttered. As they ventured deeper, Clara realized her friends were no longer with her. Panic set in as she called their names, her voice echoing back. Then from the corner of her eye, she saw movement in a mirror. A figure, not her reflection, darted across the glass. She froze. The figure appeared again, this time staring directly at her. It was her own face, but twisted in a grotesque grin. Clara backed away, her breath quickening, but every mirror showed the same horrifying image. The figure spoke, its voice a distorted version of her own. "You're almost home." The lights flickered, and the maze seemed to shift. Clara ran, turning corners blindly, only to find herself back at the same spot. Her doppelganger stepped out of the mirror, its grin widening. Clara tried to scream, but no sound came out. The creature reached out, touching her forehead. The world spun, and Clara felt herself pulled into the cold glass. The next morning, the carnival left town, leaving no trace of the mirror maze. Clara's friends swore she'd gone in, but never came out. Weeks later, a small antique shop in a neighboring town displayed a new piece in its window, a full-length mirror. If you looked closely, you could see Clara's terrified face staring back, her fists pounding against the glass in silent desperation.